Chapter 4. Group. I was sitting in my bunk wondering what, if anything, my future held when the guard yelled out, "Anyone want to go to group?" My cellmates left and I listened to their feet shuffle down the hallway. I wasn't going anywhere. I was happy to see them go. At least I could be alone for a while and have some privacy. Thoughts were swirling in my head, and I didn't want to do anything. What was the point? What could I do that would make my life better? Had I known what was happening, I would have run to the meeting. I stared at the wall until I heard laughter coming from the hallway. It was my cellmates returning from group. I had no idea how much time had passed since they'd left. One of my cellmates came in, sat down on his bed, and began reading a book. All I could do was think about my life that would never change. I don't know if I will ever live outside of jail again. I can't get a break. Only 83 days to go. I had not seen anything other than the inside of my cell, inmates, and guards since my court date. Occasionally, a new inmate would arrive and break up the boredom, but for the most part, the days and nights melted together. There was one inmate I couldn't help but notice. Everyone did. He was well over 6 feet tall and must have weighed 240 pounds. He was bald. But most important, the guy was solid muscle. Another inmate filled me in. His name is Charles, and he gets what he wants. Even in here. Don't mess with him. If he asks for it, give it. He could break someone like you in half. He's doing life on a murder charge. He's here on a different case waiting to be transferred to prison. He was right. There was no way I could stop Charles from taking anything he wanted, and I mean anything. I'd always been told I was a nice-looking kid, 5'10" and 170 pounds. People always said I had a boyish face. Whatever. Sometimes being cute isn't all that great, I thought. I'm a virgin, at least in some ways, and I want to stay that way. Charles isn't my type, and I hope I'm not his. I didn't want to be his. After dinner, which I'm pretty sure was actually Gainsburgers with rice and warm milk, the guard called out for group. "Who wants to go?" The prisoner above me got out of his bunk and put on his slippers. "What's group?" I asked. "Oh, we just talk about stuff." "Like what?" "Work, freedom, books, traveling, God, that kind of stuff." I didn't know much about any of that, but I wanted out of the cell. I'd been in the same place with the same people breathing the same air for 7 days. I put on my sandals, followed the other inmates, and headed for the end of the unit, where the tables were. Going to that first meeting was a great decision. I found an empty table and sat down. 2 other guys eventually sat down with me and said hello. At the front of the room was a guy who was definitely an outsider. The only person that I had seen in a week who wasn't wearing a uniform. His silver hair was combed back and his skin was slightly tanned. He wore a t-shirt, shorts, and sandals. Leather sandals, not the cheap foam kind like they were making me wear. The leather band of his watch matched his brown shoes. Lucky guy. I envied anyone who could come and go as he pleased. Must be nice to be able to walk out of this lousy stinkhole. "All right, guys, time to get started." The outsider spoke loudly and clearly. The conversation at the other tables came to a complete stop, as if the other prisoners knew something valuable was going to happen, and they did not want to miss it. Inmates did not get that quiet, even for the guards. "Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. For those of you who don't know, my name is Malcolm, and I'd like to—" I didn't hear another word that night. Instead, I let my mind wander and I thought about a few questions. Why would a person give up his time to come talk to a bunch of people in jail? What does this guy think he can teach me? Does he just come down here every so often to make himself feel better? Probably won't see him again. After the meeting, everyone was smiling and slapping each other on the back. For a moment, it didn't feel like jail. Everybody was friendly. Malcolm, or whatever his name was, had brought some books with him, and he handed them out to anyone who wanted one. There's lots of time to read in jail. The sound of inmates getting up from their seats at the end of the meeting pulled me back to reality. The outsider was shaking hands. He gave someone a little blue book. I headed down the dingy, fluorescent-lit hall. I'd left without taking a book. As I walked back to my cell, I could still hear the laughter bouncing off the concrete walls, and I tried to remember the last time I had laughed. When I got back to my cell, I couldn't even remember what the outsider had talked about. I couldn't recall one word. But I did remember the hope those guys seemed to have. One of my cellmates finally made it back in. He was holding a book. He jumped into his bunk, moved his pillow, and began reading.